I'm Eride Ranger, and today we're going to be going over the Talaria MX5 Pro, the newest released bike from Talaria, and this thing is absolutely insane off-road. It's got some really nice improvements over the MX4, and we're going to be going over all that today. We're going to be breaking this video down into a few different parts. We're going to talk about the battery, the motor and controller, the suspension, the wheels and tires, the sprocket and chain, the controls, the overall frame, build, and dimensions of this bike, and finally the price. Now before we get into it, I want to start off by saying that I own a Talaria MX3. Talarias are great bikes. They are absolutely awesome for off-road, and we're going to be getting into the details of why pretty soon. If you've seen my other videos, you've seen that I've talked about the Eride Pro SS 3.0 and the Eride Pro SR, and you might have heard me say that I've got the Eride Pro 3.0 on pre-order. And that's not to say that I've turned away from Talaria or anything like that. I just found myself doing more street riding than dirt riding, and the Talaria really excels at dirt riding, but I did opt for the Eride because it's just better for my use case. So to start things off, the battery on the MX5 is new. It is bigger, better, and stronger than the MX4 battery. We can see here that the overall shape does come up a bit, so you are going to have a lump in front of you, but that is an option a lot of people take when they upgrade their batteries, is to have an expanded battery cover like this. But if we compare it to the MX4 or the MX3, it's definitely a noticeable difference. So this battery is 72 volts. MX4 was 60 volts, so this is going to be a stronger, faster bike. We have 40 amp hours. Now the MX4 did have 45 amp hours, so we did have to sacrifice some to get up to 72 volts here, but it's absolutely worth it. When you multiply volts and amp hours, you get watt hours, and the MX5 has 2,880 watt hours compared to the MX4 2,700 watt hours. So it is still an improvement. We also see better battery cells in this bike. The MX5 comes with Samsung 50S cells, and that's an improvement over Talaria's other models, including the MX4, which all had LG 21700 cells. That is where the changes end. We can see that the Talaria MX5 still has a left-hand charge port and the same Talaria unique battery connectors as all the other bikes in its lineup. If you're wondering how that battery compares to other bikes on the market right now, it's equal in size to the Eride Pro SS 2.0, and the only thing stronger than this battery is the Eride Pro SS 3.0. The MX5 has a new motor. The left-hand view just shows the cover, and it does look similar to the MX4 and MX3, just with a different logo. But if we look at the right-hand side, and I apologize, there's only 3 photos and there's no right-hand side here, but we can see it in these photos here, and that is a bigger, beefier motor than the MX4 or MX3. That's the one on the MX4, and that's the one on the MX3. Now the motor on the MX5 is an IPM motor, just like it was on the MX4, and that was upgraded from the MX3, which was a PMSM motor. So PMSM motors are permanent magnet synchronous motors, and what a lot of the industry uses right now, including the Eride models that are currently coming out, are still using PMSM motors. But Talaria made this upgrade on the MX4 and kept it for the MX5. The IPM motor is a better, more efficient motor. Although this motor is the same type as the MX4, we're getting a lot more power from it. We're getting 500 Newton meters of torque, 5.5 kilowatts of rated power, and 13.4 kilowatts of peak power. That is a huge increase from the MX4, which only had 4 kilowatts and 8 kilowatts respectively. And if we compare this to other 72 volt bikes on the market right now, the only thing that can beat it is the Eride Pro SS 3.0, and just by a little bit. The MX5 has tons of power. The controller has also been improved. There's not a lot stated about it, but it's safe to say that this is now a 72 volt, 14 kilowatt controller. And although it visually looks similar to the other Talaria bikes, this is one of those upgrades that's all about what they did to the internals. So here's the MX5 controller, and we can compare that to the MX4 and MX3 controllers. The suspension is also improved on the MX5. We're seeing Talaria factory front forks and rear shock, just like on the MX4, but we can see that these are tuned for optimal off-road performance. So I don't know if they changed the build of the Talaria factory fork or just changed the tuning, but it is improved over the MX4 Talaria factory forks. Now these Talaria factory forks and rear suspension are great. They were huge improvements coming from the MX3, which had terrible RST Kiloforks, or the DMM Volcanoes, which a little bit better but still not good forks. So it's nice to see that these are better and optimal for off-road performance, which is really what the MX5 is targeting, is really nice off-road performance. The rear shock is also Talaria factory, just like the MX4, and the MX3 had a DNM or Fast Ace rear shock. And the funny thing about that, if we look at the MX3, that Fast Ace rear shock, and I only know this because I have the MX3 and I looked at it, it is the BDA 53RC, which funny enough is the exact same rear shock that's going to be coming on the Eride Pro 3.0 and Eride Pro SR. So if the Talaria rear shock has been improved since the MX3, both on the MX4 and on the MX5, it's going to be better suspension than the new Eride Pros. One thing that Talaria has kept the same is the tires. These are the same tires as the MX4, are the same tires as the MX3. These are 19-inch CST tires, 7100s in the front and 8100s in the rear. One thing they did change is the hub and spoke design. So now we have straight pull CNC machined wheel hubs and reinforced spokes. And it's a little bit hard to see with these photos, so I pulled up Surronster's video, and that is a beefy wheel hub, and those are some thick spokes. It's really nice to see this improvement with such an off-road centered bike. And if you compare this to something like the MX4, the MX5 wins hands down. While we're talking about wheels and tires, let's also talk about the brakes and rotors. These have got a lot of improvement to them. The brake lines are thicker and are now running DOT liquid. There's a bigger reservoir, bigger lines, bigger calipers, bigger brake pads, bigger rotors. Everything's been improved. It's hard to see this stuff pictured, so again, I'm going to turn to Surronster's video where he gave us a good close-up look at all these things. So here's the MX4 caliper, and here's the MX5 caliper. Absolutely huge. And this is him comparing the brake pads. Again, huge difference on the MX5. Massive brake pads on the MX5. The rotors on the MX5 are thicker. They're the same size as the MX4, but thicker. These are 220 by 3 millimeter rotors, and compare that to the MX4, it was 220 by 2.3, and the MX3 only had 203 by 2 millimeter rotors. So this is something Talaria is constantly improving: the brakes, the brake pads, the calipers, the rotors. Every model seems to have an improvement in this category. The rotor also has the same rotor guard as the MX4 and a similar design to the chain guard, although it's made out of a new material. It's not the rubber of the MX4 or the plastic of the MX3. They did improve this chain. It's now a 428 chain, and the other bikes all had 420 chains. I think the only other bike doing 428 right now are the new Eride models. The MX5 goes back to a 48 tooth sprocket. They had come down on the MX4 to a 44 tooth sprocket, and the MX3 had a 48 tooth sprocket. So this is kind of personal preference. A lot of people will change this to their liking, but a larger sprocket with more teeth means more acceleration and more torque, where a smaller sprocket with less teeth would have a higher top speed. We also have an internal, redesigned, reinforced gearbox for quiet, reliable power. It's really nice to see this with such an off-road centered bike because you don't have to worry about stretching or snapping your belts. And Talaria is the only manufacturer right now doing a gearbox. Now you do have to do oil changes on this gearbox every, I believe, 3,000 miles, but don't quote me on that. I have the MX3, it's really not a big deal, and it's a nice trade-off for not having to worry about replacing snap belts. The controls for the MX5 are going to be very similar, but have a few more functions compared to the MX4. If we start on the left and look at the display, there's not really a good picture of it here, so let's go to Surronster's video again. The display is the same shape and size, but now in full color. We have the same mode button, but now there's an extra mode, Eco, Sport, and now Hyper. We've got the same selector arrows, and these change the regen level, and there's 4 levels of regen, plus a regen lever over on this right-hand side. This button over here is the ready button, so after you turn on the ignition for the bike, you have to hit this button before it'll start going. There's now a light switch. This is the first time we're seeing a light switch for the Talaria bikes. And we have the same horn button here. Alright, time for some details on the frame. The skid plate appears to be the same. There's no mention of it changing compared to the MX4 or MX3. We do have new pegs, so the MX3 had those cheap pegs like the Surron, same as the MX4. But now we've got some nice CNC pegs, which is one of the first things people always change, so it's nice to see that they've included it in this one. We seem to have the same frame. Just like the other Talaria bikes, this is 6061 T4 and T6 aluminum alloy. Just like all the other ones, we have a horn, we have a headlight, we have a taillight, we have a VIN. Although it's nice that we can turn the headlight off now. This bike is heavier than the others at 159 pounds. The recommended weight is the same on this one. Max recommended load is 220 pounds, and that is significantly lower than a lot of other bikes in this class. And I think the keyword here is recommended load. The seat height is 33.1 inches, the same as the MX4, and lower than the MX3, which had a pretty high 34.3 inch seat height. We have the most ground clearance so far at 11.8 inches, where the MX4 was 10.2 and the MX3 was 11. So this is going to be really nice for clearing logs and rocks while on the trails. We have our widest wheelbase yet at 49.2 inches, where both the MX4 and MX3 had 48.2 inch wheelbase. And last, I want to talk about price. The MX5 is $4,700, only $500 more than the MX4, and 100% worth it. If you were to buy the MX4, the upgrades that you're going to want to do to it are going to quickly put you well over this price. Just going from a 60 volt to a 72 volt, it's going to be a couple $1,000, let alone getting the new pegs, the new brakes, the new motor. The MX5 is well worth it. Now at $1,500 less, you can still get a brand new MX3, but there's been so many improvements since this bike, I don't think it's worth it. If you really want to go cheaper, there's better, cheaper bikes out there right now. Overall, I would say the MX5 Pro is an excellent off-road capable bike. If you're someone that rides mostly off-road, mostly dirt, sometimes in the street, I would highly recommend this bike. Now, I know I said I have the MX3, but I've pre-ordered the Eride Pro 3.0, and that's just because most of my riding is street riding, so I don't need the off-road centric Talaria model. It's nothing against Talaria. I'm not switching away from them for any particular reason besides the fact that I don't do a ton of off-roading. Talarias are excellent bikes, and I still highly recommend them. I love the quality. These are some tough bikes. They stand up so well to so much punishment. Alright everyone, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this breakdown of the MX5 Pro. My name is Eride Ranger. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, subscribe for more content like this, and comment down below what you'd like to see me cover next. Thank you for watching, and ride safe!